this next segment of our lecture on causality and observation versus experiment, we'll be taking an example which will help illustrate the role of observational studies in clinical research. So the example that I'm going to choose is of studies of smoking and lung cancer. So we're going to talk about some of the early epidemiologic investigations of cigarette smoking and lung cancer. And I'm going to be quoting a lot from an article by a gentleman named Ernst Winder, who was a researcher on some of the earliest studies of tobacco and lung cancer. But he actually wrote an article in 1997 reflecting back on his experience decades ago. Few people know how difficult it was in those early years to attract attention to the vital scientific and public health issues in regard to the relation between smoking and lung cancer. In retrospect, the apathy of health professionals makes for an astounding lesson in public health history. So you guys, having been trained in medicine or health sciences in recent years, I'm sure you heard a lot about situations in which cigarette smoking is bad for people's health, a number of different diseases in which cigarette smoking increases the risk or makes the course worse. But Winder is reflecting back on a time when that was not considered common knowledge. People did not think of cigarettes as being a health problem. So what I'm asking you to do is step back and imagine that you were like him, that you went to medical school in a time when you were not told that cigarettes were bad for you. And we're going to look at some of the evidence that started to be accumulating from observational studies. And you're going to ask yourself, if I really believed, like people in those decades of the 1940s and 50s, if I believed that smoking had nothing to do with people's health problems, how much evidence would it have taken? How much of this evidence would have to accumulate before I started to change my views? So I'm told that in 1939, there was actually a publication finding a statistical link between smoking and cancer in a small-scale study. That's the first evidence that anybody has pointed out to me. Returning to Winder's article, he commented that in 1947, generally the medical profession in those days did not seriously think about smoking as a potential cause of major diseases. So I'm going to ask you to put yourself in that mindset. You went to medical school, no one told you that smoking was a cause of disease. So Winder says that he visited the American Cancer Society in New York City and introduced himself to its medical director, who at that time was also a smoker. His opening statement, even before I had a chance to present my request for support from the ACS, was, "On smoking and lung cancer, my mind is closed." So, 1948, American Cancer Society director, a smoker, his mind is closed on the subject of smoking and lung cancer. So this is not all that long ago, 1948, and so thinking really changed. And so this is why I picked this example, is because what did it take in terms of observational evidence to change that thinking? But anyway, the American Cancer Society did, in fact, provide funding, perhaps not the director personally, but someone else approved the funding for Winder's research. So 1950 was the year that 3 key case control studies linking smoking to lung cancer were published. One by someone named Levin, then there was Winder with a colleague Graham, and another by 2 individuals named Dahl and Hill. And the studies we're going to look at in depth are those of Dahl and Hill.